Since the late 1880s, visual artists and storytellers have used moving images to create visual stories. Movies have thrilled us, empowered us, and inspired us, captured our imaginations and allowed us to share our experiences and dreams. We have now reached a milestone in technology. Video editing is evolving away from the methods used back to when it first began. In this documentary, you will learn how editing has evolved throughout the decades and how basic techniques inspired the complex skills we see today. The Lumiere brothers. You've probably never heard of them, and they're more important than you might think. These two projected the first film. To their advantage, they were technically minded and managed to create a device which combined both a camera and a projector. This was called the cinematography. The brothers managed to use this device to shoot their films. One of them, for example, was called The Water Awarded. As the Lumiere brothers were the first to create moving images, they didn't have any inspiration other than what they'd experienced already. So, as a result, theatre, what they would have known and loved, inspired them. Main action was set in the centre of the frame, and characters would enter and leave the frame as if they were entering and exiting a stage. I set out to try this technique myself. So, basic film now existed. This leads us on to Georges Méliès, who accidentally discovered a technique important to today's film: splicing, also known as jump cuts. Splicing is a technique that at this point wasn't thought of. It seemed as though a jump cut may confuse an audience. How can something be in one place and then different the next? Well, Méliès accidentally did exactly that when his camera jammed. By the time it was working again, the scene had altered. He then went on to create a variety of films using this technique, as if by magic. He also painted his scenes frame by frame, resulting in the first colour film. Here is an example I made. So, by this point, film existed. Not only that, but the scene changes existed too, in a way that theatre couldn't achieve so easily. This brings us to Edwin Porter. This man managed to put two and two together and realised that if scene changes can happen, maybe his film could be a little longer. And that is what he did. Porter was the first man who managed to create a film around 10 minutes long by using long shots and splicing the scenes together. Obviously, this was still a slightly tedious way of watching films compared to what we have in this day, as it literally was just an organised collection of long shot clips with no further editing. The same year, Porter discovered that to show in more detail, he can use close-up shots by moving the camera closer. He used this technique in his film The Gay Shoe Clerk. I set out to try this technique myself. Continuity editing was then further developed. Every scene change to happen for a reason. So this led to further development, so that scene changes became seamless and realistic. All the scenes made sense with each other. Continuity editing is what we are most used to today. Sergei Eisenstein then developed a technique known as montage. This is where a variety of clips are put together to show different times and places. A popular and early example of this is the montage used in Rocky. What better way to quickly show events happening, leading up to something, giving the audience clues along the way? D.W. Griffith invented parallel editing. Similar to the use of montage, parallel editing shows separate events happening simultaneously, usually to build tension. Audio is vital for this. The audio must remain the same whilst showing the parallel clips. This ties the two together and gives the impression they are happening at the same time. Rhythmic editing then developed. This technique relies on the timing of the shots depending on the mood. This can be either to music or mood of the scene. The rapid shots in the film Birds expresses the use of rhythmic editing. There is a lot of movement in the scene, so rhythmic editing gives it a great effect. Leading on from rhythmic editing are tonal and intellectual editing. Tonal editing is where the emotion is brought out through the long length of shots. There is an example of this in the film Lion King. Here is an example I made. And intellectual editing is where two shots create a deeper meaning. So, there are the basics of how editing developed into what it is today. If editing was never developed from how it first began, film may never have been as popular. It certainly wouldn't be the same. Films are shot in the ratios of 6:1 and 10:1. Films need cutting down because it is near impossible for a film to be perfect shot by shot without any form of editing. Editing acts like a sieve. Only the best parts make the final cut. Editing will continue to develop, resulting in the best possible way to watch films.